Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. Wiley is committed to lifelong learning, and we are pleased to partner with the World Federation of Science Journalists and the Association of Healthcare Journalists to offer Science Talks, an educational webinar series for journalists around the world. Today's complimentary one-hour session, Science Talks with the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, Trends in Sustainable Agriculture for Science Reporters, is brought to you by the Wiley Network. Before we begin, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. We do capture all questions submitted. You can expand your slide area by clicking on the Maximize icon on the top right or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available approximately one day after today and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. And with the housekeeping items out of the way, we will begin today's webinar. Our speaker today is Felix Reinders, a professional engineer registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa. He completed his engineering studies in 1979 at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. He is the president of the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage and the former president of the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers and the South African Irrigation Institute. He manages irrigation and drainage engineering at the Agricultural Research Council's Agricultural Engineering Division, where he plays a pivotal role in the coordination of irrigation engineering research, development, testing, design, and training. With his experience in the irrigation field and as former chairperson of the South African National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, he has the opportunity to represent South Africa on international committees and interact with international counterparts on irrigation matters. And with that, I will now turn things over to Felix.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Josh. It's a real privilege and honor for me to talk to your esteemed network of professionals. And I've been asked to talk about sustainable agriculture, and I will link it up with the challenges of the water, energy, food nexus. As you know, those three are interlinked and very important in terms of the sustainable agriculture in the world. So my presentation, I will provide you with some introductory remarks and then, of course, talk about sustainable agriculture and then the nexus, the water, energy, the food nexus, and then how technology are being used to assist to keep everything sustainable. And then just to give you a brief look into what is the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, and then I'll have some conclusions towards the end. So to kick off, in terms of my introductory remarks, the nexus, as we refer to it, the water, the energy, and the food, that form the nexus where you need water that must be energized, although it can also be supplied by means of gravity towards the food area to grow that crop. And they are interlinked, and that is much researched today and also talked about in terms of the global economy. Now, if we want to go back during the World Water Week in September in Stockholm in 2013, there was a Stockholm statement that had a call for a sustainable development goal on water. Now, obviously, I am in the water business, International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage. We utilize water in an effective way to irrigate crops. That water plays a significant role in sustainable agriculture. And as an outcome of broad consultations prior to and during the 2013 World Water Week in Stockholm, they called upon the United Nations and its open working group to propose a sustainable development goal on water. And water, as we know, is the core of sustainable global development and is a cross-cutting resource. Within the post-2015 development agenda, water should be considered and integrated into all relevant areas, such as energy and food security. That is where the concept of the water, energy, food nexus is also coming in. So given the centrality of water for individuals, ecosystems, and economic development, water is a powerful tool for cooperation across borders, sectors, and communities. And I'll explain it in the next couple of slides. We all know the Sustainable Development Goals, the total of 17, and it goes back to the 1st of January 2016, when Ban Ki-moon, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, signed the document for the official beginning of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And that is a transformation plan of action based on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And, of course, the target 2030, at that time, it was 15 years. We are now 3 years down the line, so there are 12 years still where countries and companies and individuals can really apply their mind, do research, and provide solutions within this sustainable development goals. And obviously, if one talk water, there are a number of them that do address them, which number 1 and 2 is of the most prominent ones. Of course, there is also the others. But in terms of water, there are at present, and that will remain the same amount of water. That is 110 to the top left of your screen, 110,000 cubic kilometers of water per year available through natural rainfall. That is the water that remain, the volume that remain the same for everybody on Earth to utilize to their best knowledge and best efficiencies possible. So you can see the bioenergy, the forest products, grazing lands and biodiversity, landscapes, they are utilizing approximately 56% of that. And the part that comes from the natural rainfall is normally referred to as green water. That is the soil water from, the water from rain. And then blue water concept is when it reaches the rivers, the wetlands, the lakes, and the groundwater. So it depends on from where you are extracting or utilizing the water. it's then regarded as either green or blue water. So you'll see our bioenergy forest products are mainly dependent on rainwater, which is green water. Then there's a mix if we move towards crops and livestock, because water might then be abstracted either from rivers or streams or even from groundwater. And there we are talking about 4.5%. So rainfed agriculture still comprises the biggest amount of area and production in the world. Then, of course, irrigated agriculture, you can see a small portion, 1.4%, and mainly then the blue water that's been utilized for that. And then we move on to the water storage, the aquatic biodiversity and fisheries and so on, 1.3%, cities and industries, 0.1%, and then, of course, the rest flow back to the ocean. And that is our hydrological cycle of water that will evaporate, condense, it will rain, and the cycle will continue. But we only got 110,000 of cubic kilometers of water available that we should utilize effectively as possible. And there are global opportunities for better efficiency and resources of our resources in the conservation in the water, food and energy supply chain. And the idea is to improve components of the food production supply chain with respect to water and energy use, as well as reducing food wastage. Now, it might interest you, and I will come to that, is food wastage accounts for 1,380 cubic kilometers of water being wasted every year globally. And it is interesting if you start to unpack it, where that really comes from. And that is to do with the concept of virtual water, which I'll demonstrate or show you in slides, the next slides. And that is equivalent to a value of $250 billion. So translated to an easier to understand volume, it equates to a person wasting on average 243 liters of water a day in the food they throw away. So that is very important. Remember those figures, more or less, and you will see where that really comes from. So the trends, the drivers in terms of sustainable agriculture today is, of course, the quick rise in populations. There are more people to feed, and we need to have ways and means to optimize our water resources, utilizing our soils, and cultivating crops that can constantly meet the requirements of growing populations. Then, secondly, is the greater need for production. Farms require to produce more, and I'll give you some figures on that. And then, very important is the increase in urbanism. So, urbanizing, lots of people are flocking to the cities. Cities are growing, and there are, of course, less farms to do more work on. And then, of course, the widespread ecological impacts in terms of the confidence, faith in technological, political, and economic fixes. So that's very important in terms of the trend. So if we look at global population, there are different variants that can play out. And at the present moment, it's predicted that going towards 2050, we will reach about 9.8 billion people. So that is more between the low and medium variant. But as you can see, there's a steady growth from the 1960s, where we were 1 billion people on the planet. And as time goes by, there are more people, and more people mean more water are being used, more crops need to be grown, and that must be all done in a sustainable manner. So if you look at the trends in urbanization, today for the first time more than 50% of the world's population live in cities. And up to 2030, the global population will increase to 8 billion people. Now remember, we said going to 2050, 9.5, 9.8 billion people. So if 8 billion people by 2030 in cities, that is really an indicator of where the trend is going. Urban growth will be most significant in Africa and Asia. Then, of course, the United Nations, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, they made certain scenarios, and they worked from 2010 to 2100 in change of the global population. What is significant to note is, of course, the change in populations in Africa, where there will be an increase of 2.5 billion more people in Africa. Latin America, only 97 million. Northern America, 182. In Europe, even predicted less people, so there will be negative growth. Oceania, 29, and then Asia, 432 million people. And the figures that have just been released of last year, that is the hunger map of 2018, you will see the place where the biggest growth in populations will be encountered for the next couple of years is Africa. That is also where the highest hunger is prevalent. The red to dark purple is countries with between 25 and 35% of the population that are hunger. So in total, we are talking 821 million people that do not have enough to eat. And that is a concern, and that especially talk of goal 2, and that is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. The early years, global population suffering from hunger declined from 15 to 11%, and in 2016, when the SDGs were announced or developed, there were close to 800 million people, but it has risen over 900 million 2 years ago, and now it has been decreased to 821. So the impact of that is also that 1 in 4 children under the age of 5 had stunned growth in 2014, an estimated 158 million children. So there are many things in terms of the hunger in the world. The rest, you can see the blues, mean that it is less than 5%. Now, the projected impact of climate change on agricultural yields also significant in Africa. And what is also noticeable is that it will be more in the southern hemisphere, where there will be a bigger impact in agricultural productivity. You can see it will be a positive impact in the northern hemisphere, where there will be a change between 5 and even up to 25%. And then, of course, in the southern hemisphere, that is then the yellows and the orange and the red is then a negative impact on the agricultural yields. That is very significant. So by the year 2030, the following should have been achieved: a doubling of global water productivity, a realization of the human right to safe drinking water and sanitation, increased resilience to water-related disasters, an increase in food production. So if we talk about sustainable agriculture, I think we all know what it is about. And the definition of sustainable agriculture is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Just to repeat it, it is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In the picture, you can see a lot of things in terms of agriculture. And we are talking about soils, we are talking about energy, we are talking about nutrients, we are talking about integrated pest management, post-harvest, livestock, water irrigation, fisheries, wetlands. It is the whole picture that we need to farm and promote sustainable agriculture. So sustainable agriculture means an integrated system of plant and animal production practices, having a site-specific application that will, over the long term, satisfy human food and fiber needs, enhance environmental quality and natural resource base upon which the agriculture economy depends, make the most efficient use of non-renewable sources, and on-farm resources, and integrate, where appropriate, natural biological cycles and controls. Sustain the economic viability of farm operations and enhance the quality of life of farmers and society as a whole. So sustainable agriculture integrates the three main goals, and that is the environmental health, the economic profitability, and social and economic equity. That's all touches and overlaps and integrates that principles. Then you'll have sustainable agriculture. In the environmental health, we are talking about it should be bearable, equitable, and viable for the farmer, and produce the best quality food for the consumer, nurture the environment, and preserve energy. You can see all those different aspects that should be addressed. Economic profitability, of course, the interdependence of human economies and natural ecosystems. It threats the economy and society as a subsystem of the ecosystem. So it's recognized that social economic systems cannot exist independently from the environment. Very important that we should look after the environment. And then, of course, the social and economic equity. There is a natural market premium. If successful, equity will be recognized by the farmer as beneficial for this commitment to quality food output. And in addition, the farmer may get either different governments got different incentives, but favorable interest rate, financial incentives, and solution support. So if we then move towards the water, energy, food nexus and all its complexities, the water, we talk about 2% of the water is in polar ice caps, 97% in the ocean, and we only got 1% available for use. That is that 110,000 cubic kilometers that we are talking about. That is fresh water, and you will see the mapping that was done, although way back, still fairly accurate in terms of the availability of fresh water. You can see the Northern Hemisphere, South America, and then, of course, Africa. Africa, in many respects, got less than 1,700 cubic meters per person per year. the dark blue, more than 50,000 cubic meter per person per year. And the areas of physical and economic water scarcity, you can see like Africa, economic water scarcity, and blue is then, of course, little or no water scarcity. So the world will be affected going forward in different ways. If we talk of production, agricultural production, way back in the 1960s, we utilized 1,000 cubic kilometers of water per year, and to eradicate poverty by 2030 and 2050 respectively, we have to increase it towards more than 8,000 cubic kilometer or even up to 10,000 cubic kilometer of water per annum. So that is very important to realize. So how does the world utilize their water? And you'll see the pinkish colors there at the top, Canada and USSR, parts of Europe. They are mainly industry dominant users. Then, of course, the green part is agriculturally widely dominant. In Africa, about 85% is being utilized for agricultural production. The water used by country, the pink, you can see India in the reds, they utilize 685 cubic kilometers per year. They are the biggest user of water in the world. They do have the resources, water coming there from the Himalayas, and of course groundwater, depleting it unfortunately, which is not very sustainable in the way it's been done. But then of course you also see China, also 365, the pink, and then the rest is below 50. That is the green colors, and even the blue colors is less than 1 cubic kilometer per annum. And Benjamin Franklin once said, when the well is dry, we will know the worth of the water. So 2/3 of the world population will be affected by water shortages by the year 2030. And just to stress the importance of water, water is the key to food security. Water is not just for primary production. Water for agriculture connects us all together. And we have to use it responsibly, wisely and efficiently and productively. And we need to be more water smart. And of course, in the irrigation areas, a lot of improvements has been made, like in flood irrigation. Even way back it was below 60%, but there are now techniques and ways how water has been managed that it can push it up to 90%. You can see our sprinkler, our drip irrigation, trickle irrigation, up to 95%. And of course, state-of-the-art water management up to 100%, where we actually monitor what is happening in this world using satellite imagery, looking after our crops and use that water effectively. So water, of course, needs energy, as I've explained in the Water Energy Food Nexus. Energy is vital to provide water, power systems, and energy is then of great importance. And energy production consumes significant amounts of water. Providing water in turn consumes energy. In a world where water scarcity is a major growing challenge, meeting future energy needs depends on water availability. So energy needs water. You can see International Energy Association, 2012, they calculated that the energy production depends on water. Some 580 billion cubic meters of fresh water are withdrawn for energy production every year. And the extraction, transport and processing of fuels and irrigation to grow biomass feedstock are also water intensive. And there are different ways of generating power, and we need to move more to our renewable energy supplies like solar and wind, which is low in terms of water impact. So people without access to electricity, remarkable to see in developing countries. We are talking 1,265 million people, which is about 24% of the population that do not have access to electricity. And in the world, it's about 1,267, so 19% of the world do not have access. So example of energy saving, we are talking about virtual energy, we are talking about low energy precision application systems, concept that has been developed way back in the 80s already in the United States. I was there in 84 when it was under research in Texas where that was investigated. We got also the LISA systems. And then, of course, lately in the 60s when drip irrigation was introduced and now moving towards low-pressure drip irrigation systems, and then very much important, improving of irrigation scheduling. Coming to the last part of the nexus is, of course, the food. And the challenges and the drivers is, of course, the demand for food. 1 billion people are threatened by hunger. 2 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. And you can see the additional drivers, increase in populations, additional demand for food, and food production need to increase towards 2030 by 42%, by 2050 by 70%. And that must be done in a sustainable way, again, looking after your soil, the environment, and the water. And food security, as we know, is existing when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. So food security includes the following aspects like availability, access, affordability, quality, nutrition, and, of course, safety. And it's very interesting to look at the 2017 Global Food Security Index. Again, it is almost linked to the hunger mapping of the FAO, is that there's a weak index in terms of Africa, and there's a very good, the green parts in Canada, United States, Australia, Europe, in terms of the food security index. And if we look at the cultivated area of the world, today 1,533 million hectares are being cultivated, but only 300 million hectares are under irrigation. But what is significant is that 20% of the total agricultural land area supplies about 40% of the world's food. And drip irrigation, which is regarded as a water-saving technology and device, is only been implemented on 14 million hectares. And we at the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage are keeping records by countries supplying the data to really map out what is the growth and the utilization of different irrigation techniques in the world. Another factor is, of course, the arable land per capita. 1970s, when we were 4 billion people, we had about 0.38 hectares per capita. Moving towards 2050, we are talking 9.8 billion people, and due to the fact that we do not have much more land to start to cultivate, and your more marginal lands are now only available, we will only have 0.15 hectare per person per annum to cultivate. So we need to look at different techniques and ways to produce food. So the land availability for crop expansion is also limited, as I've indicated. You can see the figure there with from the FAO in terms of the potential cropland expansion per capita, square kilometers. The green parts is more than 6.5 square kilometers where that can be expanded to. So with that in mind, and we look at the production figures of only 4 crops, the cereals, our maize, rice, wheat, soybeans, you can see from 1960 there was a steady increase in production. And if we extrapolate that line going towards 2050, it is that dark, say for maize, the dark black line, then you will see the target of increase that is put at 60%. We need at least an increase of 67% for maize to sustain our present needs. And the same with rice, wheat, and soybeans. So the per capita food production calculated as total production per population, growing, but it is not as rapidly as the total population. You can see 1950s it was 1.5%, 60s 0.8%, and present it is only 0.4%. And there is not a significant increase in production to keep up with the population growth. So the world agricultural production, you can see with the index of 100, Africa is dismally not keeping up with the production, although the world in total, there is a trend of upwards. But you can see Asia and the other continents, how they maintain the production levels. And then just to talk about the virtual water concept, which you might know, that is the amount of water that is embedded in food or other products needed for its production. And water, virtual water refers to the amount of water required to produce a good from start to finish, or it is the volume of fresh water used to produce the product measured at the place where the product was actually produced. And what is significant is that at present moment, agriculture utilizes about 70% of all water resources in the world for production of food. And you will, through this virtual water, you need 25 liters of water. 1 glass of milk, 200 liters of water utilized to produce that. So you can even see that famous hamburger that we eat from time to time. 2,400 liters of water is needed to grow the lettuce, the tomato, the onion, the wheat to produce the total hamburger. So you can see a lot of water is needed for production of food. So examples of food saving, food wastage, as I've indicated, 243 liters of water a day is wasted due to the fact that we throw food away. If we could only save 10% of that, we will make a huge impact on the water in terms of saving water in that regard. So you can see USA wasted about 40%, and if you think of virtual water, virtual energy, and how much one can save. Coming to the technology part, in terms of water dependent, we already touched on that, the amount of area that's been irrigated, 300 million hectares, and a lot of countries have installed irrigation systems, 300 million hectares. As a percentage, it varies from country to country. but that is really making a difference in terms of optimally utilize their water. So in terms of region-wise, you can see the different continents, Africa, Asia, the Americas. America is one of the biggest areas where areas being cultivated to produce food on. And then, of course, the world irrigation scenario. At the top, you can see the growth, but that growth, if you express it in per capita, at the bottom right, you'll see there's a decrease. If I enlarge it, you can see the world irrigated area in hectares per 1,000 people. In the 1980s, it reaches a peak of about 46, and it is constantly dropping, where we are now at about 42 hectares per 1,000 people in terms of world irrigation scenario. Different technologies like highly sophisticated drip irrigation, our micro sprayers, our center pivots that were developed way back in 1949 by a farmer. More than 300,000 of these systems are operating worldwide. Then, of course, furrow or flood irrigation, gravity irrigation is still being practiced on the biggest area, almost 80% of the areas today. And you'll see the area total irrigated is 300 million hectares, but 82% is still gravity irrigation. And different crops, of course, are being irrigated with that. But in terms of sustainable agriculture, you need also technologies. And if you look at power and machinery, a lot of advances have been made, just to name that a few. The agricultural tractor that came about, the development of the three-point hitch, the use of rubber tires and tractors, then, of course, structures and the environment. A lot of things happen there to really assist the farming community in their farming operations, food processing, understanding of the fishing mechanism in rice, bulk curing of tobacco, for instance, information and electrical technology, rural electrification, refrigeration, and so on. Other is the development of rollover protective structures for wheeled agricultural tractors and so on. And then, of course, very important in sustainable agriculture, soil and water vision, where erosion prediction technology for soil conservation, the design of impact sprinklers, the center pivots, the development of drip irrigation systems that is really making huge advances in saving water. So very important is, of course, the way we going in terms of the future, in terms of the farm equipment systems, in terms of our tractors, planters, tillers, combine harvesters. And then, of course, within the area of the farm management system, in terms of weather maps, in terms of our forecasting, in terms of our irrigation systems with field sensors, irrigation nodes, irrigation applications. Different things need to be addressed and are addressed in terms of research, implementation, and moving towards more sustainable and effective farming aspects. We see on a daily basis new developments in agricultural robots in terms of utilizing drones, in terms of utilizing techniques to advance in terms of sustainable in the sustainable area. Then, just as I've said, also International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, just a few remarks. Our office is in India, with the Secretary General, personnel of 17. I, as President here in South Africa, we have virtual meetings, discussion on different aspects, and we got a membership of 78 countries, covering about 95% of irrigated agriculture in the world, and we got different working groups working on different aspects of water and irrigation, drainage and flood control to have a sustainable agricultural way of doing things. And we have also published our ICID Vision 2030 with our vision, a water-secure world free of poverty and hunger through sustainable rural development. And you can see also embedded in our mission, working together towards sustainable agriculture, water management through interdisciplinary approaches to economically viable, socially acceptable, and environmentally sound irrigation, drainage, and flood management. And we have mapped out different goals, 6 of them. First one, enable higher crop productivity for less water and energy. The others are also of great importance, but just to look at number 1, that is goal A, is enable higher crop productivity with less water and energy. And there's a lot of strategies that we are working on with different countries, different expertise in the world to make a difference in terms of going forward with sustainable agriculture. So in conclusion, agricultural sustainability is a must if we want to be able to produce food for generations ahead. Agricultural sustainability is complex and needs to cover the whole food chain from production to consumption. And it is within that nexus of the food, energy, water that we need to combine our efforts, our expertise to make a difference. The water, energy, food nexus is moving towards a green and bioeconomy for sustainability. Water efficiency, we have to push it towards the higher levels from 60 to 95%. Energy efficiency from high to low, limit wasteful transport of foods. Food efficiency, stop wastage, 30 to 40% wastage, and saves water and energy, and apply technology to improve food production. So I'm not sure, but this further reading are available from Wiley, well-respected publisher, in terms of also the flagship of ICID, and there are a number, and I think that will be shared with you, issues of irrigation and drainage, some key papers on the topics of the webinar. There is also a Vision 2030 that was published, and some others, the effect of fertilization, volume 67, diagnosis and improvement of collective irrigation drainage services in water user associations, and then also using irrigation to kickstart multiple use water services for small-scale farmers in Malawi. So I trust I provided you with some information and food for thought. I thank you.
Thank you, Felix, for the presentation. It was very informative. And with that, I'll begin our Q&A. I'm going to press our first question to the slide area. And this question is, what are the most important aspects journalists should focus on when reporting on sustainable agriculture?
So that first one, what is the most important aspects?
What are the most important aspects journalists should focus on when reporting on sustainable agriculture?
Well, I trust I gave you a lot of things, and that is mainly in terms of that is the water and, of course, the soils, the environment within that ambient that people should really focus on in terms of going forward, in terms of how we deal with, of course, I'm a water person, so water is a commodity that we really should focus on in terms of how we deal with it, how we apply that optimally, and to go forward that future generations will also have the availability of that water.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have one more question. It's our last question. It is, do you recommend any resources that journalists can use when reporting on sustainable agriculture?
If you say resources, are you referring to that list that I gave towards the end or not?
Sure.
Yeah, because the Wiley, in terms of the flagship Irrigation and Drainage Journal, very good resource in terms of published material that they could really have a look at. And there's, of course, only a few that we have listed, but there are, of course, a number that will provide with some useful information. The Food and Agricultural Organization also highly recommended in terms of their resources. If you go onto their website, you will see a lot of published data that are available, and I will recommend, of course, there are also other published houses that can be of assistance.
Thanks, Felix. And just to add, we have made a number of studies available from Wiley open access for the next month. So we'll send around some additional resources of some papers in our thank you for attending email that we'll send to attendees. So that's another resource that we can provide for journalists who've attended this webinar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today. This is all the time we have. On behalf of my colleagues here at Wiley and our partners at the WFSJ and the AHCJ, I'd like to thank you all for participating. Your feedback is very important to us, so please do fill out the survey, which we use to enhance future sessions of Science Talks. A video of today's webinar will be made available. If you have any further questions, please email us at newsroom@wiley.com. Our next Science Talks webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, May 21st, 2019, and will cover aging in humans. We'll be sending out registration details shortly, so be on the lookout for that. Once again, thank you everyone for your time, and thank you, Felix, as well. And we'll be done for today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and all the best.
Great. Thanks.